Hi, I'm Professor Hinch, and today I want to talk to you about literary analysis. What is it? How does it work? How do we do it? Well, the first thing that I have to tell you about literary analysis is if you're asking an English teacher or English professor, as the case may be, what literary analysis is, you are likely to get very different answers from teacher to teacher. Literary analysis is complicated, and there are a lot of different forms of it. There are a lot of different philosophies about it, and I think sometimes that is one of the reasons that teachers never know what to say to students because there are so many different ways of thinking about it. What is the best way to think about it? How do you get started? And so on. Now, that said, there is a definition of what literary analysis is supposed to be. Just a quick purview of the internet, and what I see here is literary criticism, literary analysis, those words are interchangeable, is the study, evaluation, and interpretation of literature. In effect, literary analysis shares a lot in common with textual analysis. For more information about textual analysis, please consider checking out my other video on textual analysis. That said, without re-explaining everything in that video, what can I tell you about that statement, the study, evaluation, and interpretation of literature? Well, essentially what you're doing is you're looking at the parts of a novel, a play, a short story, a poem, something that's written down. You're looking at elements like character, setting, tone, imagery, and you're trying to come up with something that I would call a genuine insight. Very specifically, in layman's terms, you're trying to come up with something that's not literally in the story. So let's say for just a moment that you read a story about a man who slays dragons. Something that doesn't really count as literary analysis would be that, if I was to write something like, in this story, the man slays dragons. That's not analysis, that's just summary, that's just like what actually happened in the story. If I wanted to analyze a story about a man who slays dragons, then I might try to tell you what the dragons really mean. They're not really dragons, they're actually a metaphor for some other challenge in his life or some such business. Some of you might hear me say that and very rightfully respond, well, Professor Hitch, it just kind of sounds like you're making it up. And you're right, I am. I have no idea what the dragon really is, and really for all we know, it may very well just be a dragon. But that's the second half of literary analysis. So you're trying to come up with a genuine insight, something that's not in the story, but then you need to use evidence from the story to prove to me that your analysis is correct. And so that's when you would start to look at characterization, start looking at plot, try to find quotes to back up whatever your analysis is. Also, just a key piece of advice for anybody listening. The fact that you not only have to tell me something that didn't happen in the story, but that you also have to use the story to cite whatever it is you're going to cite, pretty much means you have to read the story. Semester after semester, I get students who come to me and they say, I'm having a lot of trouble with this essay. And after a little bit of investigation, I get them to admit, well, Professor Hitch, I read most of it. Most of it's good. That's definitely better than none of it, but that's also not all of it. To really, really master literary analysis, to come up with those genuine insights and to find evidence you can use, you have to read the story. Probably more than once. So to review, literary analysis is the study or examination or evaluation or interpretation of literature. Literature, in the case of this video, being described as novels, plays, short stories, or poems. In this analysis, you look at the elements of that literature, things like character, setting, tone, and imagery, to come up with a genuine insight, which we have defined as something not actually in the piece of literature that you are currently analyzing. Then you'll use the literature you are analyzing as a source to prove the point that you want to make about the text. It shares a lot in common with textual analysis. Again, I'd encourage you to check out the video. And with that all in mind, I think we've established the basis for literary analysis. Look for future videos about different kinds of literary analysis that I hope to publish sometime in the near future. But for now, that's all.